Hi, I'm Bill Edler. When beginners describe a hand they've played, they usually start by saying what their hold cards were and then move on to discuss the betting. An expert, however, would never describe the dynamics of any hand without first talking about his position. That's because in games like Hold'em and Omaha, position is sometimes as important, if not more important, than the cards you hold. Here's what we'll cover in this lesson. First, defining position and its power. We will define and discuss early, middle, and late position. Second, playing position pre-flop. We will discuss hand ranges and how they need to differ from when you're in early position through late position. Third, playing position post-flop. We'll be discussing such concepts as pot control and bluffing. Before I get into discussing why I think position is so important, I should probably define it. Position refers to where you act in the hand relative to your opponents. There's early position, middle position, and late position. As you can see in this hand here from a full table, nine-handed, no-limit game, in Hold'em, we have the two blinds, Mike and Henry. Then we have Carl, Pete, and Nate, who would be considered in early position. Acting after them, therefore in middle position, would be Tony, perhaps John. And then acting in late position would be David and Frank, the button, and cutoff, respectively. What is important to note in position is just that if you're in late position, it means you're acting after most people. If you're in early position, you're forced to act before most people. Throughout this lesson, we'll be talking about why you want to play more hands in late position than you want to play them in early position. The reason, of course, is you're going to make more money playing them in late position than you would in early position. It's not that you'll be dealt more winning hands in late position than in early position, of course. Cards are random, and the winning hand, or the best theoretical hand, will be dealt to every slot an equal percentage of the time. However, we're playing poker here. We're not playing some video poker game. And in real poker, what's important is profitability, and what's important is betting. And because there are betting and decisions such as folding throughout a hand, there are three main reasons why playing in late position is more profitable than playing in the early position. The first reason is in early position you'll end up folding some winning hands that you wouldn't have done so in late position. The second reason is that in late position, when you have a winning hand, you're going to make more out of it in the long run than you would with the same hand in early position. And the final reason is when you have a losing hand, you will, in the long run, lose a significant amount less in late position than with the same hand in early position. The principal reason for the greater profitability in late position than in early position, for all three reasons that I just outlined, is that you'll have greater information in late position than in early position. When you have to act first, perhaps you've seen the flop, you've got your cards, and you've got to decide, do I bet? Do I check? How much do I bet if this is no limit hold'em? But if you're in late position, you've seen all of your opponents go through this decision. One may have bet, some may have folded. Just in general, realize that in late position, you have the benefit of more information, and more information is the best thing a good poker player can ever have. In this case, John has pocket jacks, it's a nice hand, and makes a standard raise of 4 times the big blind, and is called in one spot. The flop is a normal flop with one overcard, and John makes a standard continuation bet of about 2/3 the size of the pot. Frank decides to call. On the turn, a blank comes, and now you can see John's dilemma. He has no idea if his hand's good or not, and he makes the prudent play, which most players would make, which is to check here and hope that Frank will check behind a weaker hand. Frank bets. Now you can see, out of position, the tough situation John finds himself in. He might end up calling with a weaker hand here and then perhaps on the river and losing more than he wants to. He might end up folding, but realizes that he could be folding to someone who's bluffing or semi-bluffing or weaker. Or he could just end up winning the pot at the end, perhaps calling here and then it goes check-check on the river. But then again, note that John has made less on this than he would have if he had position. All professional poker players understand the importance of position in their poker decisions. I'm thrilled to be doing this lesson because I think it's more important than just about anyone else I know. Everyone will agree it's important, but I'll give you a couple examples now of how extremely important it is. If I'm dealt ace-queen under the gun in a full table and I'm the first to act, I will often just dump it. Some people might think I'm crazy. Ace-queen, that's obviously rates to a high probability of being the best hand dealt there. So how could you not play it? Well, the answer is acting first in all betting rounds. I just know that if it ends up being the winner, I won't make much money off of it. However, if it ends up being a loser, because of my positional disadvantage, I can end up probably losing a big pot. If someone has ace-king out there, or kings or aces or queens, there's a good chance I make a second best hand, and I don't know if what anyone else has been dealt. I'm under the gun. I have no information. I'm first to act. So I have no information about whether there's a good hand out there or not, and I recognize that if I end up having the best hand, I probably won't make a lot of money. If I end up having a second best hand, I could end up losing a lot of money. I'm just happy to dump it. There are better situations in poker. Where the better situations are, that's late position. In stark contrast to early position, in late position, you're going to want to play a ton of hands because it's profitable to act last in all betting rounds. When it's passed to me on the button, sometimes I'll just open with any two. I check my cards just to make sure one isn't blank. As long as I have two cards, then I can go ahead and raise, and I think I can do so profitably. I already know that 5 or 6 people have mucked in front of me, and now all I have to do is win the pot from 2 other guys. This can be accomplished by raising before the flop and having them fold, or if they call, beating them out after the flop, which can be again accomplished in one of 2 ways: by having the best hand or just by betting them out. And by being able to act last, there's a good chance that I'll be able to do the latter. While I believe so extremely in position that I might play fewer than 10% of the hands under the gun, dumping ace-queen for example, and might play well over 50% of the hands on the button, certainly playing a hand like Jack-8. Others have done some work to quantify where they think hands are going to be profitable in the long run versus not profitable in the long run. Andy Block, for instance, says that 11% of hands played under the gun can be played profitably in a game, no-limit hold'em game that doesn't have antes. Meanwhile, in late position, he thinks that 45% of all hands can be played profitably in such a game without antes. I highly recommend that you check out Andy Block's starting hand requirements chart. It's available on Full Tilt Poker Academy. Let's move on to an example that shows just how important having position is after the flop. Here we have an excellent example of the importance of position in No Limit Hold'em. It's in a Poker After Dark episode, and 2 of the world's finest players, David Benjamin and Daniel Negreanu, are involved in the pot. The blinds are 1 in 200. David Benjamin is dealt pocket 8s and makes a rather standard raise under the gun +1 as the second person to act to 700, which is 3.5 times the big blind. It's passed to Daniel Negreanu, who looks down at ace-deuce of clubs. It's kind of a marginal hand. He makes the call for one reason only. He has the button, he will have position, and he finds that to be profitable, as we've been discussing. They're the only 2 people to see the flop. The flop comes down queen high, and you'll see David makes a continuation bet. This continuation bet is standard and doesn't give away the strength of his hand. He could be doing this with aces, with a set of queens, or with junk. Daniel knows this and makes a call, not on the strength of his pair of deuces, but on the strength of his position. He believes that he will be able to steal a pot later if David buckles. Jack comes on the turn, and David does buckle. He's got 3 overcards to his 8s. Daniel decides to check, realizing he'll be able to steal this on the river if David checks to him again. David does check to him again. Daniel only bets 1,000 into a pot that had 3,700 in it. David folds, seeing that there's such a likelihood of him being beaten, and Daniel takes away the pot, not because he had cards, but because he had position.
He came all the way from France to fold 2 pairs. I don't know what. I don't want.
Another important advantage of having position on your opponent is the ability to control the size of the pot. We're about to look at an example of a player who does so, and what he gains is the ability to keep the pot small because he just has a marginal hand. Good poker players want to play big pots with their big hands and small pots with their small hands. Here's another hand from Poker After Dark. It beautifully illustrates how you can use your position to maintain the size of the pot in a comfortable small position, which is what you want unless you have a monster. In No Limit Hold'em, 1 pair, even with a good kicker, is never a monster as long as you have a stack size that's not tiny. In this situation, Phil Gordon makes a standard raise with blinds of 1 and 200 to 3 times the blind of 600. Chad Brown makes a somewhat loose call out of the small blind with 7-4 suited. So the pot is going to be, after Ali Najad folds, the pot here will be 1400, seeing the flop. We have what is called an action flop, in which Phil flops top pair, top kicker, and you'll see that Chad flops an open-ender. Chad checks, and with such a draw-heavy board, Phil makes a pretty reasonable continuation bet of almost the whole pot, $1,300 into a $1,400 pot. Chad has an open-ender, which is a little weaker because there are 2 hearts on the board, but makes kind of a standard call here. He's unlikely to semi-bluff raise here because he could so likely be up against a made hand. It's probably just better to make a call and hope to get your miracle 8 or 3 on the turn. That's exactly what happens. And Chad checks, hoping Phil's gonna bet behind. Of course, then looking forward to making a large check raise, but Phil's too smart, and Phil checks behind, knowing that his 1 pair is probably good. In this case, he's wrong, but really checking to manage the size of the pot, which is what you want to do when you do not have a monster. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on position. You'll learn more about position and other poker topics on Full Tilt Poker Academy.